Welcome to the Progress Zone podcast, where we help you create real momentum in your mindset, business, health, and life. I'm your host, Jody Donaldson, and every week we'll explore the small, intentional steps that lead to big, lasting growth. This isn't about hype, it's about habits. So let's get started. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Progress Zone podcast. Today, we're talking about leadership, not the kind defined by titles or positions, but the kind that shapes people, organizations, and communities over time. My guest today is someone who has spent his career doing exactly that, often behind the scenes and always intentional. I'm joined by Brian Etheridge, the CEO of Leadership North Carolina. Leadership North Carolina has developed and connected leaders across business, government, education, and nonprofits, people who are influencing the direction of this state in meaningful ways. And Brian has been right in the middle of that work, helping leaders think differently about influence and their responsibility and their impact. This conversation is about leadership that multiplies, legacy that lasts, and what it really means to leave things better than how you found them. Brian, welcome to the show.
Jody, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you. And it's great to share this virtual space with you this afternoon. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I explained a little bit of who you were, but for the folks that may not know you yet, can you just take us back a little bit and tell us about your background and your journey and how it all started and how you ended up where you are today?
Absolutely, and thanks for that. Thanks for that opportunity. So I consider there are two types of North Carolinians. There are native North Carolinians, of which I am, and then there's the rest of us that got here as quickly as they could. So I'm in the first camp. I got here literally from birth, and grew up in a small town kind of right in between Raleigh and Fayetteville, a small town called Lillington. It's the county seat in Harnett County. Had a great experience growing up there. You know, you're in rural North Carolina, but getting to the big city of Raleigh or Fayetteville was only a 40 to 50 minute drive back then. Went to college at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, had a tremendous experience there. And like a lot of folks, you kind of replay parts of your life and there are forks in the road that you take. I would have never been able to dream of where I am now based on, being a high school student in Harnett County. So I was actually in college and was a political science major. Okay. Thought I wanted to go pre-law and kind of go that route and really kind of had a change of heart kind of halfway through my sophomore year. And I'd been volunteering in downtown Wilmington. I've been working with youth and really felt passionate about that and decided to change my major to education and became a teacher. And it was an amazing experience. I taught for 2 years in New Hanover County in Wilmington, and then moved to the Triangle and taught another 4 years in Wake County. So wow. I taught second grade, I taught fourth grade. I worked with third and fourth and fifth grade students. So for anybody out there wondering, like I was always taller than the students I was teaching. It was an incredibly rewarding. It is the hardest work I've ever done.
I'm sure.
But it was one of those where, you see, a choice point, a path that you can take. And I was starting to get restless. I was restless in the classroom. If I'm being honest with myself, I was feeling a little confined by the four walls of my classroom, and I wanted to have an impact outside of the walls of my classroom, but I didn't want to become a principal or an administrator. And I love those folks and I value their work, but I knew that wasn't the right fit for me. So I actually I made a transition to the nonprofit sector. And this goes back to networks and friends. And I had a friend who shared with me an opportunity with a nonprofit that represented all the independent colleges and universities in North Carolina. So I'm talking nice. All the HBCUs, your Dukes, your Davidson, your Wake, but also some of your smaller institutions, some of your research institutions, all across North Carolina. At the time, there were 36. And that transition helped open my ties really to opportunities around higher education in North Carolina. And a lot of what I did was basically raising money from corporations, foundations, other groups across North Carolina to help reduce the debt burden for first-generation college students.
Wow.
Making education accessible and affordable. And I did that for 4.5, 5 years. I had a tremendous team. My leader at the time was Dr. Hope Williams, who's still the leader of the North Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities, and she's a remarkable leader and trendsetter. And I learned so much during that tenure about the broader impact of education and how higher education in North Carolina is really unique. That there's collaboration between the community college system, the UNC system, private colleges, K-12, and that doesn't exist in every state in the United States. Sometimes those relationships are contentious. And I got to see, real role models of how we collaborate. And it kind of reinforced for me this vision of North Carolina that I grew up with, that while there are differences in policy and maybe politics in North Carolina, there's kind of this strong, pragmatic kind of streak that runs through North Carolina. And when it comes to doing some of the bigger things, we find a way to find some common ground and build consensus, even when things may be difficult. So I did that for a number of years. And then that same connection that helped me find the opportunity with North Carolina's independent colleges and universities, shared with me. He said, you really may want to take a look at this thing called Leadership North Carolina. I've been doing it for a while, and it has a very similar donor base to what you're doing now. And again, it was another choice point. And what I realized as I interviewed and interfaced with the search firm applying for this job, it had the potential to fill that void that I was experiencing from leaving the classroom.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, with Leadership North Carolina, every year through our process, folks apply to the program in June. We have a selection committee that reviews all those applications, and of those selects 55 roughly folks from all over the state. About half of those folks are from the private sector, and the other half are a mix of government, education, and nonprofit leaders. But we gather for the first time as a group in October in Boone at Appalachian State University, and that's the first time everybody meets one another. And there's something really remarkable about meeting a group of people for the first time, because everybody comes in expecting, there's, who all else is in this cohort with me? Where do they work? What's their title? Folks naturally have conversations or think to themselves, am I on the same level as these folks? Sometimes some imposter syndrome can take root, and folks start doubting if they measure up. And what we provide folks at this, orientation session is, it's getting to know one another on a personal level first. It's stripping the titles and the employers and where you're from and what you drive or any of that kind of stuff. That all is, I wouldn't even say secondary. It's way down the road. It's getting to know folks first and building relationships, so that you can build on that scaffolding of relationships and understand big systems in North Carolina. And when I talk about big systems, I'm talking how state government's structured, or how health and human services are structured and delivered in North Carolina, how education is structured, how we deliver education, what access looks like, where we're doing well, where we're struggling. Also looking at things like economic development. Where are jobs being created? Where are opportunities? Where do we need to find alignment between our workforce, which we were recently rated by Site Selection Magazine as #1 in workforce after CNBC ranked us #1 for business. Those are some pretty amazing accolades. But are we looking at things that feed that success? Because a lot of those decisions, a lot of that success we're experiencing now that's based on decisions and policy that were made 10, 20, sometimes 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And so there's some of that. So, I made that decision to come to Leadership North Carolina. And what I didn't share with you and your listeners is that was in 2006. So I am, with this March, 2026, approaching my 20th anniversary at Leadership North Carolina. And it's been an amazing, rewarding, enriching experience. But we're currently on class 33.
Oh.
With that class, we will cross 1,600 alumni that have graduated from the Leadership North Carolina program and are having an impact in their communities all across North Carolina, and beyond. I mean, there are folks that have taken opportunities in other states and in other countries and are having a pretty profound impact. But I shared the news with our alumni, with our board, late in 2025 that I plan to finish out this program year. So when class 33 graduates and we close out the fiscal year in June, that I'll step away from Leadership North Carolina and explore what my next chapter looks like. So that'll probably factor into our conversation a little bit today as well. But it was one of those, I'm ready to explore and maybe exercise some muscles that I've not been able to over some of these past years, but also leverage and build on the relationships and the knowledge that I've had the good fortune of gaining during my tenure at Leadership North Carolina.
Yeah.
And then, a little bit more about me. I'm fortunate, living in the Triangle, married, the love of my life, my wife Meredith. We got married in 2003. We've got 3 children. So one in college, one about to go to college, and one in middle school. And that means that life is full and very active, and feel very fortunate in that respect. And then, have benefited from the opportunity to, kind of be involved in the community in a lot of ways, whether that's through, other nonprofits or civic organizations or our church, and find a lot of fulfillment and growth opportunities there too. So just grateful, Jody, for the opportunity to be with you and share this time with you and your listeners.
Yeah. Brian, that is an amazing story. First off, congrats on 20 years. That is an amazing run. So kudos to you for being able to go through all that. And I'm sure you've been through a lot over those years. We were talking before a little bit. So there was a recession, and then there was this thing called the pandemic. Like you've gone through some roller coaster of a ride in that journey. And I want to ask you, starting out as a teacher, I know you said that the work that you were doing in Wilmington at the schools, was there any other teachers in your family, or was it really just after that work that you were like, hey, I feel called to do this?
That's a great question, Jody. So education was, I would say, a bedrock in our family. So my mom was a teacher and took time away from the classroom to have me, my sister, my brother, and then went back to work for the Harnett County school system after we were, kind of middle school aged. And then my dad was in public service, started off in a business career and then served in elective office, first as a county commissioner, then as a member of the General Assembly, and had a role in the mid to late 80s in shaping a lot of education policy as a member of the General Assembly, and then served 2 terms as state superintendent. So that tenure of him serving as state superintendent directly overlaid with my high school career. So I was a very well-behaved high school student, because the last thing I wanted to do was, rock the boat because your father is state superintendent. This was back when, this was all pre-Facebook, pre-social media.
Oh yeah.
But there was a very, very active local newspaper that, they did a phenomenal job, and I just wanted to make sure that I was never in print. So I was a pretty straight-laced high school student.
Nice.
But yeah, education was a big piece, and probably a neat kind of anecdote was when I graduated from college and I received my North Carolina teacher's license. I received that in the mail, and for your podcast subscribers and listeners, anybody in North Carolina that's a teacher is going to get a teacher certificate as long as they meet the credentials. And that certificate issued by the state of North Carolina is signed by the state superintendent of public instruction.
Oh my gosh.
And it was kind of neat because I get that in the mail and it's signed by none other than my dad, which was kind of neat. But that also added a little bit of pressure of I wanted to make sure I did the absolute best for the kids in my classroom, because I knew there were extra eyes on me of,
sure,
is this for show, or is he really in this? And I probably put more of that pressure on myself than anybody else would have, but I wanted to make sure that I was doing right by my students, and that, we take North Carolina's Constitution very seriously. Our state has a constitution that said that every student is obligated to receive a sound basic education. And I wanted to make sure that I did everything I could to make sure that the students in my care received everything that I could provide for them, and working with the team at both of the elementary schools that I had the good fortune to work at. Yeah.
Wow. So I commend you for being a teacher. I think it's one of the hardest jobs out there, especially today. I feel like there's a lot of pressure. There's, just a lot of work for them. But teachers are leaders. And I think like that foundation for you probably really helped you through your career. What did you, and you might not have, but was leadership something that you were drawn to through that? Or did you just kind of learn it through your journey that, hey, this is kind of a similar thing, it's just a different audience?
I think that's a great question, Jody. And I believe, there are leaders that are born. I think leadership as a skill is something that you're constantly learning more about and applying and refining. I don't think it's like pick your favorite, bucket list vacation spot.
Right.
There's not a destination. You're never going to fully get there. I remember hearing as a middle and high schooler, conversations in our family. There was a lot of talk about lifelong learning. And some of that related to policy, but a lot of it was just perspective of life of if you quit learning, you're stagnant, and feeding curiosity, always being curious. So that was one trend, and that curiosity and feeding that curiosity and wanting to understand not just, let's say it's policy, understanding people, getting to know them, being curious about, their experience, what shaped their values. But the other thing I learned fairly early on, and it was before my teaching career, but it was definitely reinforced during my teaching career because I saw it all the time. I would argue you could take any public school teacher in North Carolina, almost put them in any other situation, they are going to find a way to excel. They are some of the most, my grandmother would say they could make silk out of a sow's ear. Teachers are a resourceful bunch.
Yeah.
And I'd put them up against just about anybody. They are hardworking. They're used to finding a way to get to either yes or finding a way to help a child. They're pretty relentless folks. They're driven and determined. I think they deserve a ton of respect and admiration. I have colleagues that I taught with, I think the world of, and still keep up with to this day. So I think a lot of that was shaped, one, from how I was raised, but I had the good fortune, growing up in a small town, scouting was a really big part of our town. And Lillington wasn't huge, but we had a pretty active scout troop. And I and a number of friends all went through scouts together. I learned a lot of leadership lessons there.
Yeah.
It was a space where you could make some mistakes in leadership and you could learn from it, and you receive some coaching. Sometimes it took me a lot longer to figure some of that stuff out than maybe some of my peers, but I earned my Eagle Scout, and those leadership lessons that I learned from scouting continue to serve me to this day.
Yeah.
There are times where I'll be maybe butting my head against the wall trying to figure something out, and my son, our youngest, is in scouts now, and I'll go back through that scout handbook and realize, I need to reframe some of this and refresh my own thinking around some of these things. Hearing it a second, third, or fourth time is sometimes helpful.
Yeah.
And having some humility of I didn't execute well on that. Let's try to do this better the next time.
Yeah.
And having some of those conversations can be really, really, really helpful. So a lot of I'd say great experience as a child, great exposure to leaders and things like scouting to kind of help shape me. But oh my gosh, I've had amazing colleagues and teammates from teaching to my work at the independent colleges to now at Leadership North Carolina. And it just reinforces for me. And I shared this with you before we went live, like as big as North Carolina is geographically, and we're continuing to grow. As big as we are geographically, North Carolina is still a lot like a small town.
Yep.
In the fact that there are not many degrees of separation between everybody in North Carolina. And I see that as a good thing. You're close to people. There's a way to dial in and find a sense of community. I think now more than ever in this environment where life is fast and life is busy, having your people, finding your people, finding your community, is super, super important.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Something you mentioned that I think is so important too, and kind of the premise of what we do here was you talk about being a lifelong learner, and just, I have a saying, I say, it's ABL. It's always be learning. Like and I know not everybody's wired that way, but I do think, and you brought it up too, that being stagnant, I feel, if we all take the moment and check with our future selves going to better hope that we're doing something to grow and learn and be curious, like you said. And if we're not, then we're letting down our own future self, which I think is just, if folks can put that in perspective and realize that, I think it would help those that might not be as motivated to always be learning or asking those questions. But I'm with you on that. I love that. And I think that's such an important part, not just of leadership, but just, as a human trying to grow and stay, don't get stuck. Right.
Well, and look, I'll be the first to admit, like I've had seasons where I felt stuck or
Sure.
I felt stagnant, or I've had folks say, they kind of check in and I realize like, I'm not necessarily 1% better today than I was yesterday, or,
Right.
So let's make some adjustments. And, that's not necessarily fun, but to your point, like, let's check in with the future self.
Yeah.
Where am I wanting to be? And, it's incremental progress. You're not going to make big, huge strides. It's a little bit every day.
It's a journey.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, you've been around leaders for such a long time in so many different settings. When you listen to kind of how leadership is talked about today, what do you feel like people miss?
There's plenty of, leaders you maybe want to aspire to, or leaders that get your attention. I think even more importantly, over the last, 5 to 10 years, leadership is more of the focus has been driven toward leaders you connect with, or kind of that authenticity kind of piece. I was a little slow to come around to that. I was, a little more rigid, not necessarily comfortable, opening up on that vulnerability side.
Sure.
And slowly came around to it. It just took me a little longer. But it's definitely one of those areas where I've seen that increase. And it's not like, spilling your guts, telling your life story type thing, but it's, acknowledging, there are parts of life that are hard. There are parts of life that are beautiful. There's part of leadership that you're going to have some of those mountaintop moments, but most days it's not the mountaintop. It may be a little bit of a valley, but it's a little bit of traversing that course. And there may be some days where you take 2 steps forward and you slide backwards a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of, just kind of checking in with yourself. I've found, for me, sometimes journaling is incredibly helpful in being able to reflect on some of what I'm processing, what I'm trying to do. Am I making the progress? Being honest with myself too about like, am I progressing in this area as quickly as I want, or do I need to adjust my expectations? Sometimes of even myself,
right,
of being impatient with how long it may be taking me to get somewhere, or to accomplish some goal. So that's one of the areas I've seen leadership kind of change more, and I think that overall that's good.
Sure.
I think it's good for folks to kind of see leaders as more authentic, that, we're not one, leadership is not one dimensional. I think values are really, really important. And there's several leaders, that I've admired. One is, retired General Hugh Shelton, who, is a North Carolina native, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And so much of his leadership was values-based leadership. And he actually started the Hugh Shelton Leadership Challenge and Institute at North Carolina State University, and has done a phenomenal job over the course of his career, even post-military, in instilling leadership and the importance both from the business community and civically of values-based leadership. And I think that's just a tremendous example for others to delve into.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. I think too, when you think about the leaders that you've seen and kind of talking how it's kind of evolved or developed or changed, is there any particular like trait or something that separates those that really can grow versus the ones that just seem stalled or stagnant in that? Is there anything that sticks out from all your years of experience seeing different folks in all different sectors?
I think 2 things. One is the ability for a leader to connect with you individually, really being able to, make that human to human contact. And then the other thing is, and this isn't necessarily leadership, Jody, but it's, being able to show results, to be able to execute. And that can come in a lot of different forms. But I think being able to connect with people is critically important. To be able to kind of convey a message to people that meets them where they are, I think is really important. And then, I said it earlier in our conversation, I think that curiosity can really be contagious. And if folks feel connected with you, if they feel like you're really listening, if there's a measure of, I'm concerned about you, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
And that's mostly been my experience of some leaders I've come across over the course of my career, that they have a vision, they can articulate what that vision is, they can communicate that effectively, but they can also connect with people. So it's a little bit of being able to take the look at the horizon, the strategic, but then also, managing some of those details as well, while maybe not getting overwhelmed by them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that transparency and that, a leader needs to be human, right? We're all human, and it needs to have some humility with that. And I think it just makes a difference in that connection that you're saying. It builds trust, and it also, I just think, will help reinforce the relationships that you have when you need it as you grow, whether it's your business, your nonprofit, whatever it is, right? When you have those authentic, true relationships and you feel connected, I think that the work can get done so much better, and it's so important. How much of that do you think is the mindset of those that are really good at it?
I think those that are really good at it, regardless of the type of or structure of organization you're leading, whether that's, like in my case, a nonprofit, or if you're a Fortune 500 company, or you're somebody that is working in the public sector, whether that's in education or state or federal, local government, I think so much of the strength comes back to your people. I'm going back to the curiosity. Like, I want to know how my team members are doing. Like, we start off on our weekly huddles. I'm like, all right, Mondays when we huddle, I'm like, tell me what y'all did over the weekend. What's going on? If as we're recording this, we're potentially dealing with some wintry weather here in North Carolina this weekend. I'm gonna be really curious how everybody fared, but also, like, what kind of fun did folks have during that? And it's not just banter for the sake of banter. I'm really curious of what folks are doing.
Yeah,
learning from them, hearing about their life experiences. Some of the most effective leaders I've seen, obviously care a lot about their people. And you can be a great leader, and that's connecting that way is not your thing. You can still be an amazing leader. That's just what I've found works well with me and kind of my personality, and feeds my curiosity as well.
Yeah. Well, in Leadership North Carolina, you work with leaders from all walks of life. And the way that the program works, I think, is just so special. But when you're trying to develop leaders at that scale, because there's so many people from so many different backgrounds, what's been the hardest thing in your experience to help people like truly grasp like what they're a part of? Like, I think it's so special, but I don't think people realize it.
Jody, I appreciate you bringing that up. And it is really hard in the moment sometimes, because for those that are tuning in to your podcast, like, they have a small number of sessions. Each session's 2.5 days. It's kind of a Tuesday, Thursday format, but they meet for orientation in October. November's government. Education's usually December. We do inclusive leadership in January. Some of the subjects flip-flop, but we'll do a session in February. This coming year, that's going to be economic development in New Bern. Then we'll do, health and human services in Charlotte, then environment in Asheville, and then we'll bring them back to Raleigh in May for graduation. And those cities and the months sometimes change, but that's not a lot of time together, and it goes really quickly. So a lot of what we share with people is, this is a finite amount of time. We have attempted to create a bit of a sanctuary, if you will, where you can invest in yourself and the relationships with the other folks in your cohort. And we want you to really lean into this time. We know there's family and community and work commitments outside of Leadership North Carolina. And I tell folks at orientation, like, take care of the paying gig first. Like, do what you got to do. But as much as you can during your Leadership North Carolina experience, invest during the breaks, during the class dinners, during breakfast, in having conversations with your fellow class members, because that's probably the biggest benefit. Aside from the learning about all the systems and what makes North Carolina tick, that probably comes secondary. The relationships are probably the most valuable part of the entire experience. And you're going to get out of that what you put into it. And we really want to encourage folks to lean in as much as they can. And we've seen over time, like people develop lifelong friendships, business partnerships, collaborate on public-private partnerships and community efforts. And a lot of that can be traced back to their Leadership North Carolina experience. So I say leaning into that. And Jody, probably the most rewarding part of that is folks that, aside from Leadership North Carolina, they may have never met one another. They might view the world in totally different ways and come at it with different lived experiences and exposure to different parts of life. And, it gives them some common ground, and that's hugely beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, the space that you all create, it allows you to be a little bit vulnerable, allows you to come in with no bias and just truly experience other people, other opinions, other ideas in a safe space. And so I commend you for that as well, because I think that's a hard thing to do when you have 55 type A, probably personalities in a room that command a room when they are presenting, and now they're all together and they're all just equal. So I think you guys do a good job of that, but it's got to be hard.
It is challenging, but it's a great challenge.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, you've got 55 type A folks who are used to being able to, drive decision-making and make progress on a myriad of topics and areas of society. But, more often than not, they're coming at this with a pretty pragmatic view of like, I'm curious about learning about the other folks in my cohort and how I can leverage this knowledge and these relationships to make North Carolina better. And the beauty of that is so many of them, not everybody agrees on how we need to make that progress. And that's great. That's totally fine. The diversity of like how we get there is part of the point.
Yeah.
A lot of it is, and you've heard me talk about this numerous times. Like we use this illustration of 3 cups of coffee, of like, it is so important for leaders to have 3 cups of coffee with somebody who sees the world differently than they do.
Yeah.
And the way that works is you literally, like if it was you and me, I'd invite you to coffee and I'd be like, Jody, tell me your story. Tell me how you came to see the world. What drives you? What experiences helped you to shape your view of the world? And my job's just simply listen. My job is not to like correct or judge I'm just curious and taking in that information. And then the second cup of coffee, I get to tell you my story. And by the third cup, we're realizing like there's a lot of stuff we probably have in common. And the difference is we've got a level of rapport and trust with one another where we can talk about those differences without, I've invested 2 coffees with you, and I'm probably not going to throw that investment of time, which none of us can get any more of.
Right.
I'm not going to throw that under the colloquial bus to maybe win an argument, because I've invested this time in getting to know you, and I value that relationship that we've cultivated with one another. So that's really important. And I think, the hardest part of that whole 3 cups of coffee process is the making the time for it.
Yes.
That's the hardest part. Once you start doing it, having a 15 or 30 minute coffee is not that hard. It's making it a priority and making the time for it. But I found time and again, like people are good. People can be frustrating.
Sure. But
by and large, people are good. And if you give them the chance to tell you their story, you're going to come away with new information and better perspective and a lot of good information after the course of that first coffee, and Lord knows where you'd be by the third.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love the 3 cups of coffee. I think it's something so important that people can take away with them. And if nothing else, put that on your calendar and time block for it so that you do it. I think, even like you think about like even being part of chambers and things like that, like the networking that they do, it's so important. And it's not fake. It's not, these people are authentic. And I feel like inherently we want to help each other. Like if anything I can do for you, I want to do it. I mean, it's nothing off me. I want to see you succeed, and I think that lifts each other up. And I think the coffee is a perfect example of how you can build those relationships, and really, really build that rapport and trust, so that then you can have maybe some crucial conversations, or some conversations that you don't see eye to eye on, and get through it and still be okay. So no, I love that. Let me ask you this, Brian. Leadership, I think, feels heavier today than it used to. And I think it's just because more visibility. I feel like there's a ton more pressure or more scrutiny. We have 24-hour news cycles now. Like there's just a lot of pressure, and it's heavy. From what you've seen, what helps some leaders carry that weight better than others?
There is a heaviness.
Yeah.
There's a responsibility. A leader, I think, the world of, guy by the name of Erskine Bowles in Charlotte used to use this phrase all the time of, giving back to the community woodpile. I love that imagery, because I was one of those kids that we had a fireplace growing up, and I was the designated wood chopper, and I would go and scoop the ashes, and I'd refill it and help chop wood and bring in wood and all that kind of stuff. So just the act of doing something with wood resonated with me. But it also, it's the same adage of, like you said, leave the place better than you found it.
Yeah. And
I think that can look a lot of different ways. I think, in leadership, integrity matters greatly. Being honest matters. And sometimes that's honest with yourself. And I think sometimes in the course of that honesty, you realize, like, okay, what I was trying to do got me a different result. Like my intention was here, but the result was there.
Yeah.
And realizing, like, all right, I made a mistake, or I didn't go about this the way I wanted to. Acknowledge it, deal with it. If there's a breach, repair it as best you can. And then, you keep moving forward. And I think part of the struggle, and I've dealt with this some too, Jody, of like, you feel it, you feel that weight. And there've definitely been times where I've not carried it well. Yeah. And I've had to talk to friends. I've had to talk to other leaders. I've talked with my family. I've talked with my pastor of, like, how do I do this? Right. And sometimes it's several things. It's, for me, it's exercise and kind of literally getting that frustration, getting that tension out of my body. There's seasons where I've done that great. There's some seasons where I've not done that quite as well. I worked out this morning, but I will be the first to admit it's the first morning this week that I worked out. So right. I'm not proud of that, but I'll own it. But I was like, I don't want to get up when it's, 20 something degrees and go outside and work out, but I need to do this.
Yeah.
I'll feel better on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of ways. I mean, you lean on your community, things like exercise, taking care of yourself, like, sleep is, I'm finding, is a bigger thing for me than it used to be.
Sure.
What I'm putting in, the food I'm consuming, makes a difference. And in spending time to enjoy life, being with my family, being with my kids, doing stuff with my friends. I'm one of those people that I get energy from being with people. And that recharges my battery to a point, and then I need to take a little break. But I think leaning into those things that give you a chance to recharge that battery so that you can, shoulder that load and continue to help others. And I'll be the first to admit there's times where I've had a hard time with that. And, you lean on your resources and your friends and your community, and you're like, okay, I've got a pathway to navigate this more effectively now. So
Yeah.
I think that's, it'll be a little different for everybody, but I think to your point, like, yeah, there's a heaviness. We've all got that moral compass that helps drive us too. And, that can be guided by, faith. That could be guided by, your family and your community. It could be a little bit of everything.
Sure.
And, encourage folks to continue to lean into that.
Yeah. Do you think people underestimate about the pressure that comes with the responsibility of being a leader? I mean, we're talking about the weight of it, but like, do you think people just they underestimate what it's going to be when they get into that? Or because it does feel heavy. It does feel, under scrutiny all the time. But folks want to strive to be a leader. So if folks that are on that journey, do you think they just underestimate how tough it really is?
I think it may be different for different sectors. I think sometimes it can be, and they may misinterpret how long of a runway they've got to navigate.
Yeah.
They think, okay, I'm going to get 6 months to a year, and it's 24 months or 36 months later, and you're still, struggling, and you're still pushing. And I think having folks around you that, and it doesn't have to be a big group. It could be folks that you meet with once a quarter or once a month with over coffee or a meal. Like there's something healing about sharing a meal together and having conversation. It could even be, just a walking meeting. I'm a big fan of like meeting and walking, and I've got a good friend who kind of introduced me to that concept. I'm like, when your body's moving, it just gives you some freedom to think a little differently. And I think that helps with, maybe it's holding yourself accountable, but it's also thinking differently about some of the challenges, some of the weight, some of the heaviness that you may deal with as a leader. But I think it's really important for leaders to take a step back, whether it's over a weekend or a vacation or whatever, and spend some time, goal setting and reviewing, and then coming back to it, finding a way to charge your battery and come back. I see it in the nonprofit sector. I've dealt with it before of like folks burning out, and you got to find a way to replenish, go back to the well and replenish your battery, and so that you're able to serve others, serve your family, serve your community, serve your business and your employees, and be there for your team. And when you're not, own it, deal with it, acknowledge it. Like I said earlier, work to repair that breach, and then move forward, and you continually learn and feed into that curiosity. But to your point, Jody, there's a heaviness and a weight there. But I also see freedom in that weight of I get to do this as opposed to I have to do this.
Yeah. And
sometimes just that simple word choice can be a real help in mindset.
Yeah.
I get to XYZ versus I have to XYZ.
Yeah, that simple talk track can change so much in anything you do, right? We take so much for granted, and I loved how you touched on it. I didn't say it at the time, but when you're talking about self-care, and I'm a big believer of the gratitude journal. I think it puts things in perspective, right? So it shows you some grace for yourself when it's been your only workout this week or anything like that. Like, I think, you can look at the accomplishments that you've done and the things that you're thankful for and all the work that you've done all these years, so I think it puts things in perspective, and it is part of that self-care that you need to do, that to make you a better person, to show up for your family, your friends, your coworkers, whatever it is. So, do you think there's a responsibility part for leaders to prepare others to lead?
I think that's a great perspective. I've always kind of looked at leadership kind of like climbing a ladder, and that you really climb a ladder with one hand and your 2 feet, and that there's the possibility that you've got one hand behind you helping bring other folks along.
Yeah.
I had a minister years ago shared an adage. He goes, this work is really comes down to kind of one beggar showing another beggar where the food is.
Yeah.
Like, we're the beggars. We're all the beggars. Like, we are in need. We all have things where it may be a void, it may be a goal, but it's something we're trying to accomplish or fill. And we're all trying to, move in a direction. And like you said, whether it's the networking, other things, like we get to help each other.
Yeah.
And I think, I have enjoyed greatly opportunities to help other people. And some of that, quite frankly, is at this age and stage of my life, it's helping out my son's scout troop.
Yeah.
It's taken a bunch of, young teenage people and helping them understand that, character matters and discipline and, learning things and being able to repeat them and master them. Those are important skills, and that it's okay to not, achieve it the first time. Nobody's an expert. Like, I so love, Malcolm Gladwell and, that concept of 10,000 hours before you master something, whether it's hockey or the Beatles or like all these great examples he gave. Like, I definitely see it in myself. I see it in young people. Like, we want to be awesome the first time we do something.
Right.
And that, that's
it's
just
that
not
instant
realistic.
gratification
Like,
world that we're in.
Exactly. Like, I want to crush this the first time I try it.
Right.
Like, the only thing I'm going to crush the first time I try it is maybe if I'm eating something. Like,
Fair.
I can do a really good job at that. But, you take cooking, you take, any kind of skill that you've got to develop. You get better with practice. You get better with, some adversity and difficulty, and that muscle becomes stronger and you get better at it. And after a while, it becomes almost second nature. But, to your point of journaling, like, if you go back and look at what you were doing 5 years ago, there's probably some stuff you're doing now that is much easier than it was 5 years ago, because it's become part of maybe a daily routine or a part of a practice. And, it goes back to that curiosity piece, like, looking at how you can improve. I'm so much better at a lot of things because of, like, great team members. Like, my team at Leadership North Carolina, like, I owe so much to them of, like, they are continually focused on how do we make the experience better for the folks going through the program? How do we execute on this? And they are so incredibly talented and thoughtful at the same time.
Yeah.
It's not an either or for them. It's a both and. And to your point earlier, some of it's how we frame it and how we say it, but that makes other people around them even better. Especially me.
Yeah.
I'm incredibly grateful to them.
Yeah. They're definitely the A team. Well, let me ask you, Brian, we're getting close on time, but, some advice for emerging leaders. There are probably people listening right now that are just early in their career and their leadership journey. They may be capable and motivated, but still trying to figure things out, as we all are every single day. What would you say to a young leader, or, are there things that they might be worrying about maybe that they don't really need to?
That's a great question. I go back, and I'm still to this illustration saying of like, being curious. And like we said earlier in our conversation, like it's not like a vacation spot with leadership. You're never going to like get there. It's always a continual process. I work hard. I'm working harder at what can I control? And let me focus on the things I can control. And not that I'm not going to worry about the things I can't control, because there may be things down the road through relationships and networks that I can influence.
Sure.
And I would encourage young or emerging leaders, find a mentor, find somebody who is maybe Jody, they're the person you want to be in 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And get together with them maybe once a quarter or once every 6 months and just ask questions. Tell them, and take notes when you do it. Certainly ask permission, but ask them, like, what are the things that shaped you? What worried you? What would your advice for me be? And truly listen and write it down and then go back and visit it. And then the other thing is build the relationships before you need them. Yeah. Invest in people. That time is rarely wasted. I have a lot of belief, people by and large are good. They're interested in helping one another, and invest in that time and leaning in, and you'll find that your ability to help others will grow exponentially.
Yeah. There's so much about that. Those relationships, like you said, build them before you need them. And I do think that people are genuinely want to help. And if I don't know what it is, maybe it's, I feel like sometimes because we want to know it all the first time and we want to do it, that we don't become vulnerable and say, here's things I really want to work on. I don't know what I don't know. Talk to me. Right. But I think sometimes, maybe I'm just generalizing, but I think a lot of people don't put themselves in that situation and be vulnerable and transparent. But if they are, those people that you're with usually will lift you up and want to elevate you to where they are, right? Like, I feel like that there's more people that want to pull you up than folks that want to pull you down. You are going to have some negativity times, but yeah.
Well, 100%. And I think, look, if I'm being transparent, like if you'd have asked me, if we'd have gone back, I'm 52. So 52 years old. There's a little bit of crossing that threshold of 50 of there's some things that just don't carry as much weight,
right,
or matter as much as they did when I was 25 or 30.
Yeah.
And if you'd asked me some of these questions early in my career, I'd have really struggled to answer because I'm like, who's going to hear, oh my gosh, did I,
yeah.
And you're constantly armchair quarterbacking yourself.
Right.
And that is, and that would occupy some space. And I'm like, am I saying all the right things? And, just being able to take a breath and just, have a conversation like this is huge. And, I think for a lot of folks, just getting that practice and, to our point earlier, like grab 3 cups of coffee with somebody and just have some conversations and spend some time listening. And, that goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Brian, as you look back on your leadership journey, what do you hope people remember most about the way you showed up?
Jody, I hope it is probably centered most in what I shared earlier, that I left, an organization better than I found it. But the other piece too is, it's really important for me. And I think part of this just is coming from an education background, you're working with people, right. Is how I made folks feel valued. And that's really important to me. We all have value. We all have purpose. And it takes us a while sometimes to figure out what that purpose might be. But we all have immense value. And sometimes it takes a little while of work to figure out what that what that value is. What I hope folks know is they've got it. But I also acknowledge, like, sometimes the struggle of figuring that out can be a real challenge.
Yeah.
But interacting with other people, we're designed to be social creatures, and interacting with others is part of what makes us tick. And just leaning into that. There's a great song by Drew Holcomb, find your people. And sometimes it takes a while, but find your people.
Yeah. There's so much with that. I want to tell you how I see you show up, and it is authentic, and it is transparent, and it is just being a person that wants to help and see success in others. And so I just think this conversation, it just reinforces, something that's important. And I think it's just, leadership isn't just about the visibility or the role. It's about, like, the responsibility. And I think the work you've done has shaped so many people. I think it's strengthened organizations across the state. I think it's really helped create leaders who think beyond themselves. And that kind of impact doesn't fade when titles change. So I just want to thank you for your leadership, for the leadership that you've shown, and for the leaders that you've helped develop, and for taking the time to share your perspective today. This has been incredible and a meaningful conversation to me, and I so appreciate your friendship.
Well, I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate the gift of your time, and this chance to just have a conversation. Like, this has been time incredibly well spent. I hope it's of benefit to your listeners and your viewers. And, we're all working to try to be 1% to 2% better than we were the day before. And it's incremental. Like, you think about a cross country flight. Somebody shared this with me several years ago. If you're flying from LA to RDU and you change by a couple of degrees north or south, you're going to be in very different places. Right. You might be as far north as Baltimore, New York, or as far south as Florida, depending on, which airport in California, whether it's LA or San Diego or San Francisco, where you end up with 2 degrees different can be pretty amazing. But it's that slow, steady progress. And I'm saying that for my own benefit and reminding my own self of that as much as sharing it with others. Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate you and the example you set, and this relentless energy of finding purpose and progress and helping others. That doesn't go unnoticed. And it's contagious. Like, folks appreciate that. So thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. I do care, and I do want people to be better and live up to their potential and optimize their life as best we can. I think that's something we all strive for. But Brian, thanks again, man. I so appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
And to everyone listening, just keep leaning into your growth, stay intentional with your progress, and remember that big change comes from the small, consistent steps. So keep showing up, keep doing the work, and keep making forward progress. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining me in the Progress Zone. If today's episode gave you a spark, share it with a friend, subscribe, or leave a quick review. And remember, progress isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. I'm Jody Donaldson, and I'll catch you next time inside the Progress Zone.